All right, today we are diving deep into the wild 19-year saga of Panic at the Disco. And trust me, this is a story about a band that became a total paradox, an enigma wrapped up in vaudeville, pop punk, and eventually just pure solo stardom. And this really is the central puzzle, isn't it? How does a band that starts out as four high school kids from the Vegas suburbs end up becoming a living, breathing example of an ancient philosophical thought experiment? Okay, so this is going to be our lens for this whole thing, the ship of Theseus. It's really the key to understanding how a high school punk band, one that got discovered on, of all places, LiveJournal, could transform, piece by painful piece, into something totally new, but somehow still familiar. So, you ready? Let's start at the beginning, with the original ship. So let's go back. The year is 2004. We're not in some grimy club scene, nope. We're in the suburbs of Las Vegas, where these four high school kids are making a very conscious choice to reject the whole local death metal thing. They were aiming for something, well, something way more ambitious, something avant-garde. You know, how they got discovered is like the blueprint for the internet age. Seriously. Forget grinding it out in local venues. Their guitarist and main lyricist, Ryan Ross, just relentlessly spammed their demos all over Pete Wentz's online forums. And you know what? It actually worked. Wentz was so hooked, he literally drove out to Vegas and signed them right there on the spot. And get this, they had played barely a handful of live shows, like ever. Naturally, this whole thing immediately got people screaming industry plants. So their debut album, it was this wild, high-concept piece of theater. I mean, it was literally split into two acts, complete with an intermission. And the difference between the two halves was just jarring. And that was totally the point. The first half is all synthesizers and drum machines, and it's basically taking shots at the very emo scene they were being lumped into. But then, bam, the second half just pivots into this entirely different world of baroque vaudeville stuff. We're talking accordions and cellos. There was just nothing else like it out there. And this wasn't your typical pop-punk angst, you know? It was way more self-consciously intellectual. Think about it. In a scene where every other song was about heartbreak, Ryan Ross was literally pulling his song titles from the pages of authors like Chuck Palahniuk. He was aiming for this level of social commentary that just put them in a completely different league from everybody else. And boy, did it work. That iconic video for I Write Sins Not Tragedies blew up. And their whole circus chic look, it basically defined the aesthetic of the mid-2000s emo scene. The album sold over 4 million copies. I mean, they were massive. But as you can probably guess, all that initial success, it was about to lead to a complete and total fracture. So, after a huge tour that totally changed the game for stage theatrics in pop-punk, and a pretty messy firing of their bassist Brent Wilson, the pressure to follow up that monster debut album led to a pivot. A really dramatic and super divisive one. Yeah, this table really lays out the core conflict perfectly. Their second album, Pretty Odd, was a total 100% rejection of their debut. They even dropped the exclamation point from their name. They traded the circus costumes for vintage suits, and they swapped out all the synthesizers for the sound that was just drenched in 1960s Beatles-style psychedelia. For a lot of the fans who fell hard for that first album, well, it was a baffling move. Kind of alienating, to be honest. And the tension behind the scenes, it was just completely unsustainable. This wasn't just some stylistic choice. No, this was a full-blown creative civil war over the very identity of the band. And it ended exactly how you'd expect. The band literally split right down the middle. So this was the band's first major Ship of Theseus moment. When they lost Ryan Ross, they lost their main lyricist, their creative architect. A huge, fundamental piece of the original ship was just gone. Which leaves you with the question, right? With only half the original crew left, was it even the same vessel anymore? So the years that followed, this is where we see the rest of the ship's original planks get replaced. Gradually, one by one, until only a single, very charismatic piece of that original structure was left standing.
So Brendon Urie and Spencer Smith, they kept going. They brought in Dallin Weeks, who actually became a super important creative force for a while. But after Spencer Smith made the brave move to step away and focus on his health, well, the transformation was finally complete. By 2015, every single other original member was gone. Panic at the Disco was, for all intents and purposes, just Brendon Urie.
And, it's crazy, commercially, this change was a huge, massive success. The first album that was officially just a solo project, Death of a Bachelor, it went straight to #1. The Panic brand became totally synonymous with Brendon Urie, who was just masterfully blending the Sinatra-style jazz with modern arena pop.
And here's what's so crucial to get. An entire new generation of fans came on board knowing Panic at the Disco not as a four-piece band from Vegas, but as one guy. One singular, super charismatic frontman with this absolute powerhouse voice. The ship had been so completely rebuilt that a lot of the new passengers had no clue what the original even looked like. But even as the music went full-on mainstream pop, Brendon never really abandoned the band's theatrical roots. He actually created this dark, interconnected trilogy of music videos that acted as this whole metaphor for how fame can corrupt you. It was a really clever move, and it kept the original, lore-loving fans deeply, deeply engaged. All right, so the project hits its absolute commercial peak, driven by that inescapable hit, High Hopes. But what followed was a period of pretty intense public backlash, controversy, and, well, ultimately, the end.
Yeah, the final years got complicated. There were misconduct allegations against a key staff member, a lot of online backlash over some of Urie's past jokes, and fans started to get really concerned about his vocal health on tour. It all just started to tarnish that shiny exterior of the brand. And then in early 2023, he announced it was over. Panic at the Disco was done. He was closing that chapter to focus on becoming a father. But just when you thought the story was completely over, it comes roaring back. A surprise announcement drops, a one-off reunion. The purpose? To celebrate the 20th anniversary of the album that started everything, headlining a festival right back where it all began, Las Vegas. And this was really the climax of the whole story. You have the fully rebuilt ship reconnecting with one of its most foundational original pieces, seeing Brendon Urie and his oldest friend, Spencer Smith, back on stage together to play their biggest hit. I mean, it was just this incredibly powerful, nostalgic moment that brought the entire 19-year journey full circle. So when you look back at the whole thing, the contrast is it's staggering. On one hand, you have the original ship, 4 friends from high school making this dense, literary emo punk. And on the other hand, you have the rebuilt ship, one global superstar creating these huge, Broadway-inspired arena anthems. Same name, sure, but 2 completely, totally different entities. And that brings us right back to our paradox, doesn't it? The story of Panic at the Disco really is a real-life ship of Theseus. It forces us to ask a really fundamental question about the art that we love. What do we value more, its origins or its evolution? Because when all the original pieces are gone, what is it that truly remains?